Deep within the unforgiving Zagros mountains, an Iranian command center lay hidden, believed impenetrable. But what if a meticulously planned assault could expose a critical vulnerability, fracturing its defenses from within? In the Zagros mountains of northern Iran, at 9 a.m., 40 Rangers from the 75th Ranger Regiment advanced through rugged terrain and biting winds. Their target, a deeply buried Revolutionary Guard command complex, hidden beneath a mountain ridge. This was no mere symbolic bunker or empty decoy. It was a regional headquarters, a hardened underground node where senior officers orchestrated military activities across 3 provinces, routed critical communications, and safeguarded operational archives too sensitive for surface exposure. For 18 months, American intelligence had meticulously observed the site. Signals intercepts, overhead surveillance, and pattern analysis gradually pieced together a comprehensive picture of its interior. The complex itself lay approximately 100 meters beneath the mountain's surface, comprising 4 levels interconnected by reinforced stairwells and service corridors. The uppermost level housed barracks, storage, and essential support rooms. The second level was dedicated to communications, while the third served as the primary operations floor. The fourth and deepest level contained the command section itself. The Iranians placed immense trust in the mountain's protection, and not without reason. The complex featured 2 heavily protected entrances carved into the slope, overlapping surface security, cameras monitoring all approaches, and a robust rotation of personnel. A direct assault would be costly, even before reinforcements could arrive. It was notoriously difficult to reach, resistant to aerial strikes, and designed to withstand attacks that would obliterate a conventional headquarters. Yet, it was not invulnerable. American planners had, however, identified a critical weakness, though certainly not one that promised a miracle. The ventilation and service shafts supporting the lower levels were theoretically large enough to permit access. However, they were far from a clean, vertical shortcut directly into the command center. These shafts were narrow, segmented, fitted with grates and maintenance brakes, making their use under combat conditions exceptionally risky. They presented a possibility, not a certainty, and this reality profoundly shaped the operational plan. Alpha Team would target the main entrance, compelling the defenders to commit their resources there. Bravo Team would assault the secondary entrance, aiming to block internal movement between the upper levels. Charlie Team, meanwhile, would utilize the shaft network to insert personnel as close as possible to the lower floors, not to bypass the fight entirely, but to fracture the enemy's defense from within. The objective was not to seize the entire complex intact within minutes. Instead, it was to overload the defensive system just long enough to secure any salvageable intelligence and extract before Revolutionary Guard reinforcements could seal off the valley. No one in the assault force anticipated the facility to collapse upon first contact, nor did they expect the defenders to panic and freeze. The plan, in fact, assumed the opposite: alarms would spread, resistance would stiffen underground, partial data destruction would likely be underway by the time Charlie Team reached the lower levels, and the extraction window would shrink dramatically from the very first shot. Helicopters inserted the Rangers into a concealed ravine several kilometers from their objective. The final approach was executed on foot. By 9:20 a.m., the teams were in position among the rocks above and around the mountain site, observing the rhythm of the complex below, guards rotating, technicians moving between outbuildings, soldiers crossing between covered points near the entrances. Nothing indicated a relaxed environment. At 9:30 a.m., the operation commenced. The initial distraction proved only partially effective. While fire drew attention away from some outer security points, it wasn't sustained long enough to blind the entire defense. Guards at the main entrance reacted, turning outwards, but others did not. Radios immediately crackled to life. The complex didn't fall silent, it awakened. Alpha Team advanced first on the main entrance. The opening minute was characterized by violent confusion. Defenders at the vehicle tunnel were struck hard, but they did not collapse immediately. A machine gun position survived the initial exchange, pinning part of Alpha Team behind broken rock. The Rangers were forced to advance under fire, clear the outer lip, and breach the entrance in stages. By the time they penetrated the tunnel, the facility was already fully alerted. Bravo team assaulted the secondary entrance almost simultaneously, encountering the same fundamental problem, albeit in a different form. While the defenders were fewer, they were better positioned. The Rangers forced the doorway, but the secondary access did not fall cleanly. It quickly devolved into a close-quarters stairwell fight, bad angles, concrete echoing gunfire, and no room to maneuver. Bravo team gained entry, but slowly and deliberately. Charlie team faced the most formidable challenge. The shaft insertion was only partially successful. One shaft led precisely where intelligence indicated. Another, however, terminated at a maintenance landing higher than anticipated. A third was sufficiently blocked to significantly delay descent. Instead of 13 men appearing simultaneously around the command center, Charlie team arrived piecemeal, on different levels, at slightly staggered times. This made the element of surprise real, but incomplete, and the ensuing fight all the more intense. The first Rangers navigating the shaft network entered the lower complex before the defenders had fully oriented themselves, but not before alarms had spread throughout the facility. On the third level, a startled communications section frantically attempted to destroy files and initiate emergency procedures. On the level below, armed guards moved swiftly to block the final corridor leading toward the command floor. By the time the lead Rangers reached the command section, the room was not frozen in helpless shock, it was in the throes of crisis. Some officers were already scrambling from their chairs. One workstation had been wiped clean, while another was still operational. A communication specialist desperately attempted to pull storage modules from a rack. Someone reached for a sidearm but was neutralized before they could even draw it. Others hit the floor. The room was secured rapidly, but not cleanly, and certainly not without a fight. This moment marked the turning point of the raid. Charlie team secured the command floor, though not precisely as the original plan had envisioned. Some data remained intact, while other portions had already been corrupted. Several drives sustained physical damage. Paper files were seized wherever accessible, and screens were photographed. Authentication fragments, routing tables, call signs, local operational notes, and critical pieces of network architecture were successfully captured. There was valuable intelligence, enough to make a significant impact, but it was not a complete blueprint of the entire Iranian command structure. Above ground, Alpha and Bravo teams were still fighting for every meter. The underground complex had not succumbed to panic. Defenders systematically fell back by levels. Landings transformed into choke points, and every stair turn became a firing position. Each gain came at a significant cost in time. The initiative the Rangers had seized at the entrances was being eroded underground by delays and attrition. By 9:45 a.m., the objective was technically in Ranger hands, but only in fragmented sections. Charlie team held the command floor. Alpha controlled the main tunnel and upper access. Bravo had successfully blocked movement through the secondary route but had not cleared every room above. Some technicians surrendered, others barricaded themselves, and some managed to destroy material before being reached. The complex was not pacified, it was fractured. This distinction was crucial. Radio intercepts soon exacerbated the situation. Reinforcements were mobilizing earlier than anticipated and from multiple directions. Dust plumes visible on the roads below confirmed this grim reality. The extraction clock, already critically tight, had just become dangerously short. The mission commander immediately curtailed the exploitation phase. There would be no broad search, no attempt to strip the complex room by room, no effort to remove every prisoner or every crate of material. Sensitive items were triaged on the spot. The most valuable prisoners were prioritized for movement, and the wounded were evacuated even before the captured files. Demolition charges were reduced to priority targets only, key equipment rooms, selected structural points, and the systems most critical to the command node's immediate function. This decisive shift altered the very essence of the raid. The mission was no longer about escaping with everything, it was about securing enough. Extraction through the mountain proved even more arduous than entry. Moving wounded personnel, flex-cuffed prisoners, and bags of captured materials up narrow stairwells, all under the constant threat of renewed contact, severely slowed the force. One assault element sustained multiple casualties serious enough to delay its ascent. Another sacrificed valuable gear to carry a ranger who could no longer move at speed on his own. Outside, the surface fight persisted. Surviving perimeter troops regrouped on higher rocks, firing back toward the captured approaches. Smoke billowed across much of the site, and burning fuel drifted low along the slope. Radio communications grew increasingly difficult to discern, every report became shorter, every answer more urgent. The helicopters did not arrive to a silent mountain and a secure perimeter. Instead, they descended into a maelstrom of dust, smoke, uneven terrain, sporadic incoming fire, and a site that was only partially neutralized. The landing zone had to remain offset behind terrain, compelling the rangers to carry their wounded, prisoners, and captured material across exposed, broken ground before loading. Cover teams remained behind longer than desired, firing from rock shelves and abandoned positions to buy precious seconds for the evacuating personnel. The loading sequence was rushed and uneven. There were fewer prisoners than anticipated, and the intelligence bags were lighter than expected. One aircraft lifted off with a crew chief still actively hauling a wounded ranger fully into position, as rotor wash blasted paper scraps and dust across the clearing. Another departed with men still scanning the slope through the open door, rifles across their knees, because no one on board truly believed the fight was over. Only after the helicopters had banked away through the valleys did the delayed demolitions commence. A communications room was the first to be destroyed. Then, part of the operations floor lost power. A structural charge triggered a localized collapse near one of the lower access sections. On the surface, one vehicle burned out completely, while another was left damaged and abandoned. Not every charge functioned perfectly, not every section collapsed. The bunker was not erased from the mountain in 5 seconds. Instead, it was crippled, buried in places, blacked out in others, and rendered unusable as a coherent command node for the immediate fight. This outcome, far from being weaker, made the result strategically stronger. By noon, the Rangers were clear of the target area. They were not untouched. They were not carrying every file or every prisoner. They had not erased the entire regional structure in one perfect blow. Iranian personnel survived, and parts of the wider network remained. Reinforcements still existed, and the state retained its ability to fight. But for a narrow, costly window, one of its key underground coordination nodes had been surgically torn out of the chain of command. That was enough. That was precisely what made the raid significant, not because it destroyed everything, but because it destroyed enough.